So we left off here, but very quickly for those of you that were online, we just introduced ourselves as Professor Saechao and Professor Moore. We're nutrition faculty, so it's just a little summary of what we did before we were recording for those of you that are online. We also asked the participants here about what is a fad diet. And one student mentioned it's since it has a specific focus on a food, such as like an apple or a cabbage or just water, and it's usually short term, okay? And then it has this big target about losing weight and losing weight fast, okay? And then we were talking about the definition of a fad diet after getting some responses from the participants. And we went on and said there's not one definition, but several, but you'll see that a lot of these are kind of cross-trained. You can kind of sum factors up together. For instance, we kind of see that there's a lot about losing weight. There's this emphasis on that it's the best, it's highly restrictive. Usually there's a problem with nutrients, they're neglecting some nutrition principle. So if you're taking notes, I would also write that they usually do neglect some nutrition principles that you'll learn about in our classes and in here today. Principles like having a balanced diet, making sure you have enough protein, learning about food groups, for example. And I'll give you guys a food group real quickly. There's a protein food group, and then there's subgroups of protein, okay? So for instance, if you're a vegetarian in here, a subgroup of protein can be something like legumes, okay, which are like beans and peas fall into this category. Also nuts, okay? So we have a food group called a protein food group, okay? We also have a green group, okay? How many of you have heard diets that neglect grains? Raise your hand. Many of us have, right? This is a big one, and you'll learn about some diets today. You'll learn the pros and cons, and you can make a decision on your own. But there's a grain group, and often this is a big one for a lot of popular diets. No grains, okay? Another food group is the food group. We all need more fruits. And then there's also a vegetable food group. And then I'm going to circle the grain, and this fifth one is dairy. So these are your food groups. So often fad diets, in a lot of these popular diets that we talk about today, they will neglect one of these 5 food groups, okay? And the big ones right now today— You have to
come closer to the computer so I can hear you.
The big ones right now today are grain, then I'll repeat it, dairy. So a lot of the food groups that are a basis of a balanced diet are the grain group, the vegetable group, the fruit group, the protein group, and the dairy group. And out of those 5 food groups, the 2 that are often targeted, I should say, in these fad diets, usually right now the big one is no grains and no dairy, which you'll kind of hear about in these diets as well. Okay. And then I'll let Megan, do you want to do the other definitions, the Chicago and our definitions?
Sure. So Chicago Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics says a diet in which the general assumption is changing diet habits for a short time in order to lose weight. So we address both of those. It's usually short term, and most, if not all, fad diets are directed at losing weight. I feel like that's changing a little bit, though. A lot more diets are sort of fixed. Are maybe, I hear a lot more about reducing gluten or FODMAPs or dairy or foods for overall health, and less fixation on weight, but that's still definitely a part of it. And so
inflammation, right?
The inflammation, yeah, that's a big part of it too. So our definition that we came up, well, mine was that the fad diets are usually popular in our culture, out in the world, things we might hear on social media or magazines or what have you, but they're not usually based on nutrition science, or they'll take one fact from nutrition science and kind of blow it up into a fad diet. You want to talk about yours?
And then mine, just to sum it up, I would say that it's usually advice. It's some kind of form of advice for an adequate diet. And an example of that is if they eliminate one of those food groups. If they don't eat grains, without specific recommendations to replace that food group. So there are people that can have grains, that can have a son with Crohn's disease, and he can have grains, but minimally. Okay, so I have to look for some gluten-free stuff. So that's a reason why maybe he should be a little bit more grain-free than the regular person. So there are instances where grains need to be eliminated from the diet, but they're not giving you advice on what to do. They just say don't eat grains because it contributes to heart disease Where they're not telling you don't eat grains, but instead eat these foods to replace the nutrients in the food group that we no longer. There needs to be that follow-up, okay? You can do the red flag.
Okay, so first of all, we're gonna talk about a couple of fad diets, but there's a lot more out there. So we want to give you some tools to be able to identify a fad diet and to evaluate whether you should follow it or maybe get some more information. So the first red flag is, it sounds too good to be true. Now, I'm very sorry, but we're here to tell you that there is no magic bullet when it comes to weight loss or even health, right? There's no one good food that's bad, no list of foods. If it sounds too good, if it sounds too easy, like cut these three foods and get a 6-pack abs, whatever. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Next is, it does not follow the basic principles of nutrition, which Teresita, Professor Saechao already talked about. So if it contradicts largely with what we do know about nutrition, you should think, maybe that's not right. That's not to say that we never learn new things and adjust our thinking in nutrition. We do, but we rely on evidence, good quality scientific evidence discovered over time. So there are changes. So if you do hear something that conflicts with maybe what you learned in a nutrition class or what you've read from a reputable source, then you maybe want to dig deeper and think about, is this really true, and where's the source of this information? It may not emphasize exercise. So if they tell you, oh, just do these 2 things and you can still be sedentary, you don't have to exercise at all, that's probably not going to help with weight loss. Do you have a question? Okay, sorry. It relies on testimonials. So if you've ever taken any kind of science class, you've probably learned about different types of evidence, and the least reliable source of evidence is a testimonial. So just because it worked for one person doesn't mean it will work for most people. That's why we do large scale scientific studies. We want to see if it works for most people, not just 1 or 2 people.
And what type of people, I want to ask you, what type of people do you guys see in the testimonials sometimes, like in social media, online? What type of people? Is it regular people like you and I, or maybe we're not regular, right? We're actually super beings, but like think about the famous world, people that don't. Do you see often like famous figures or characters maybe? I'm from the 80s and 90s because I'm in my 40s, but in the 80s and 90s, you never really saw celebrity advertise anything, not even skincare or supplements. It was usually like a overnight, the QVC channel. You had to stay late at night to see that promotion. And there's a few handful of celebrities that would promote like L'Oreal and supplements. But nowadays it's all celebrities that are advertising supplements. And now what? Celebrities are now fitness influencers online. Yeah. Some are good, some are questionable, but they're also the promoters of supplements and diets.
Yeah, so that actually takes us to, we can skip down a little bit, selling your product. So you want to ask, why is this person telling me this? If they're a celebrity, they're probably getting paid to tell you that. And there's been a few scandals where famous people are promoting a product and then they comes out, they're like, well, yeah, I never used that. Or yeah, I used that weight loss product, but I also had liposuction, So you want to think about who's telling you this information and why are they telling you this information? If they're getting paid to tell you this information, then you want to be suspect. And we get paid to tell you information, but we can tell you our sources. And they're just our scientific sources. They're just saying, well, it worked for me, so it should work for you too. But we know that's not the case. Like it sounds too good to be true. It promises a quick fix. Sometimes they do have some scientific evidence, but it might be based on one single study, and the study may not even be scientifically rigorous or valid, but they take one study and they kind of ignore how scientific research works or the science of nutrition works. So any one study on its own does not, make a finding. We don't say, okay, then it's fact. We have to retest it over and over again, right? Remember the scientific method. So just taking one study out of context is a red flag. And then also look for implausible credentials and social media. So anyone can call themselves a nutritionist. They can say, I'm a nutrition expert. But you want to look for people who actually have degrees in nutrition, people who have the registered dietitian nutritionist certification like I do, like Teresita had. So that proves that we are recognized by a formal body that says, yes, you have knowledge of this information. But anyone out there can say, I'm a nutritionist. You know, the gym might hire somebody who maybe took a nutrition class once, hopefully, and give you nutrition advice, but that doesn't mean that they're really qualified. So a lot of people on social media, even people who write books, may not necessarily have the credentials or have the education, even though they claim to be very knowledgeable about the topic. Even some doctors. So doctors, like medical doctors, they don't necessarily learn much of anything about nutrition in their medical school training, very little nutrition education. So whatever they know, they will have to basically learn on their own. And so just because they're a doctor, hopefully they know some about nutrition, but they're not necessarily a nutrition expert either. Okay, yeah, you can move that. So to start us off, I'm going to talk about the keto diet. You can just close it, I think. Yeah. Keto diet. Who's heard of keto diet? Yeah, most of us. So what's interesting about this diet is that it actually didn't start as a fad diet. It did start as a medical diet. So the ketogenic diet is a really low carb diet. It emphasizes fats as a source of energy. And so this was developed medically to treat people who have really severe seizures. Okay, but it sort of became popular in mainstream as the keto diet. Oh gosh, what, like 20, 30 years ago, I guess? It was like 30 years. Yeah, 30 years ago. Atkins, Dr. Atkins. And so people started trying this diet to lose weight. So the idea is that you have really low carbohydrates, so nothing with sugars, no grains, no rice, no pasta, very limited fruits and vegetables. And there's an emphasis on animal proteins and fat. And so the idea is that it forces the body to use ketones, so it forces you to burn your body fat instead of the glucose that you're getting from food. So makes sense in a way. Also, high fat foods are very filling, so you can eat a high fat meal and be stuck, feel full for much longer, and not feel like you have to eat again so soon. So that was kind of the idea behind it. Like, do I have more slides? I can't remember. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Go next one. So, there are some pros to the keto diet, like the high fat diet is very satiating. So if you've ever tried to do the opposite and lose weight by doing a low fat diet, you're so hungry all the time. But here the idea is that the fats are very satiating. They will sort of keep you feeling fuller longer. And so theoretically, maybe you'll eat less calories. It could also help blood sugar control because you're not eating a lot of glucose. Sugar, so or foods that can be converted to sugar like grains and fruits. So people who have diabetes might try this diet. And it can be effective for weight loss if it's maintained. So studies have shown us that you can follow a low carb diet, a low fat diet, you can lose weight and you can keep it off, but you have to keep doing it. If you go back to how you were eating before, your body's going to be like it was before. You're going to regain that weight. So if you can maintain a safe ketogenic diet for a long time, yes, you could lose some weight and you can keep it off, but you have to keep doing it. So when we give nutrition advice to people about managing their weight or managing any kind of health issue, it's not just about a short-term fix, right? Like these fad diets. It's not the 5-week diet to a better beach body. It has to become a lifestyle change. The cons. So ketogenic diet, first of all, most people who follow the ketogenic diet will have an initial really quick weight loss. So it's very promising. You're like, wow, I'm really seeing results. But that has to do with weight loss due to water, not necessarily fat. So because our body's using up all the stored carbohydrates, it's also releasing a lot of water. So they'll, in the first, few weeks to a month, they'll see, oh, I have a big weight loss. It's working. It's primarily water. They haven't lost a lot of fat yet. And it can be dangerous. So in severe cases, it can cause a buildup of what's called ketones in the blood. And this leads to acidosis. So it's can increase the acidity of your blood, which is very important. You know, if you've heard of homeostasis, it's very important to maintain a very specific pH so that everything in your body functions correctly. And so, what can happen is ketones can build up, causing acidic blood, and that can make you very sick. I see patients in the hospital quite frequently who come in with ketoacidosis, where they have a buildup of these ketones in their body and they've become sick. Not usually because of the ketogenic diet, but it can happen. And then this diet emphasizes fats. Now there's different kinds of fats, right? So if you ate healthier fats, that would be a pro, but a con is that most people tend to eat more saturated fats from those animal proteins. And saturated fats are associated with chronic disease like heart disease, diabetes, stroke, kidney disease, all those things. So it's the saturated it's usually high in saturated fats. Doesn't have to be, but it most often is. And also inadequate micronutrients. So if you're avoiding fruits and vegetables and grains, you're gonna not get very much fiber, which can cause constipation. It increases your risk of colon cancer, and you're also losing out on those micronutrients that you would get from the fruits and vegetables as well. So yeah, any questions about keto diet? It's a very quick summary, but all right. Next one.
So the next one is the paleo diet. Raise your hand if you've heard of the paleo diet. No one heard of the paleo? So it seems like this one is less than the keto. Okay, we'll see everyone raise their hand. I'm gonna write it.
If you walk too far away from the computer, they can't hear you, Teresita. Oh,
The way we without blocking the screen. So the paleo diet, as I have here in the little picture, it's referred to the Paleolithic, caveman, or Stone Age diet. So any of these three terms that you see up here also refer to the paleo diet. It's short for Paleolithic. There's this concept that our genes, there's this concept that our genes, our human beings, are created more naturally to be like a hunter-gatherer, fisher type of human being, which we know that over the years now, we've kind of evolved and our environments have changed and our genes have adapted well to that. An example that is not really is, for example, it used to be, it isn't anymore, but it used to be like a decade ago or more, that Asians, the ethnic group of Asians were the only ones that were lactose intolerant due to their diet over time because of that lack of dairy and how they produce less lactase enzymes, the lactose. But now it's prevalent everywhere. Like I have mild lactose intolerant, people in my family do now and everything. And that's usually probably due to the fact how we changed our diets and our environment has changed. So human beings, we adapt and change based on our environment, what we eat and how we think, what we do, the stressors, everything changes over time. We're no longer hunter-gatherers, right? We don't have to hunt and gather for our food. We can go to the grocery store. You can choose to do that if you actually have chickens, Megan. I actually have chickens, so I actually get my own fresh eggs from my chickens.
oh, nice.
Okay. It's very hard for me to keep a garden just because I'm very busy. And I can't, you have to take care of the road and things like that. But there is this wave of people that are wanting to eat more of their own fresh fruits and vegetables and eggs or whatever, just for the sake of, wanting more better quality food. However, this one, I like the ketogenic diet. Here's a commonality, low carb. Okay, so we see that again with the grain green. Remember I told you? So it's low carb, and when I mean low carb, they are against processed and high sodium. What's sodium? What's another name for sodium? Does anyone know? We use it in our food. Salt, yeah. So they're against, I should say, they're against processed, which is a good thing, right? So Paleolithic diet followers are against processed and high sodium and high sugar foods, which is a good thing when it comes to carbs. So eliminating those like packaged donuts, packaged bakery goods. They're even against bread. You guys know that our bread's processed, right? Milled and manufactured. So they're also against like pastas and grains. You know, things that are canned and have a lot of sodium. And there's also packaged food, not just canned food that comes in a package, like crackers or something that can also have a lot of high sodium. So they're against this as far as the low carb portion, which is a good thing, right? The purpose, again, I already talked about, their whole theory is to eat like humans used to, because their genes are better adapted to eat like that. It's not as extreme as a keto. The good thing is it does include fruits, vegetables, lean meat, nuts, and seeds. Can you also add fish to that? So, I mean, fish could be a lean meat, but lean meats can also be like chicken breast, turkey breast, the leaner part of the animal. And very quickly, I like to tell students this, because I learned this many years ago, like 25 years ago, another grad school, but I found it fascinating. But have you noticed that there's a dark part of a chicken and then a whiter part? Have you noticed that? Raise your hand if you know what mitochondria is. Raise your hand. Is it rich in blood, mitochondria, or is it foreign blood supply? Why is it red? What color is blood? Red. So totally rich, right? It's rich in blood supply. We use it for like oxidative purposes. So mitochondria is red, richer, it's really red, it's rich in blood. And chickens walk around in their legs all day, right? They're not upside down in their feathers and walking upside down weird. That's why their legs are dark, because they have a lot of mitochondria in their legs, because it supplies a lot of blood supply, a lot of oxygen. So think of dark meat like endurance animals. Like duck meat is all dark meat, right? Like duck meat is all dark meat, it's really greasy, because they have a lot of mitochondria, because they're endurance flyers. So chickens have dark meat on their legs, because they walk around the leg, it's an endurance event. Their breasts are white because they have less mitochondria. They can jump pretty well. So actually, they can jump fences and things like that, but they can't fly for a long period of time. Okay, like doves or ducks. So they just kind of fly in little spurts, kind of like those fast twitch sprinters that you see in the track and field. So they only need their wings for like little spurty things. They don't need it for a long period of time. That's why it's white, because there's less mitochondria needed there for activity. Okay, so that's just an example of, you know, lean meat, dark meat. Think of lean meat as a white meat with the less mitochondria. They do, because of the processed word, process is a big thing in the paleo diet, that they don't like processed stuff at all. So they believe that, you know, that revolution of agriculture, when we started making grains, legumes, beans, and peas, they're against the whole agricultural revolution that led to us having more food supply, mass amounts. So they're against grains, legumes, and also dairy. So those are the main things. They're against grains, legumes, and dairy, and everything is processed or packaged. It does emphasize, like I already said, it's right here, they emphasize limiting sugar and sodium. So there are some good things, as you can kind of see here. Okay, the next slide. Does anyone know what kind of, as Megan is doing this, dairy, what's one nutrient you heard that dairy has that makes your bones strong? Calcium. Keep that in mind, because the paleo diet, when I talk about the downfalls or the cons, one of the downfalls is calcium. You have to look out for that. You can be deficient. Okay. Once again, some of the good things, these are the good things. So some benefits or good things is that weight loss. There it is again, just like the ketogenic diet, right? And again, that weight loss can be due to the fact that it's the low carb. I want to highlight that. That low carbohydrate component is what causes the weight loss. Okay. I want to say that a lot of you don't know this, but did you know that for every gram of carbs that you store in your body, for every gram of carbs that's in your body, yeah, say that again? Yeah. You store 3 grams of water. So do you see how, like, if you eliminate carbs from your diet, so take away those carbs, you're no longer holding those grams of carbs, you're no longer holding that water. So a lot of it could be water loss once again. If you eliminate a macronutrient, a big nutrient from your diet, you're going to get some weight loss. If you were to eliminate all fat from your diet, you would also lose weight. Okay, so eliminating a certain macronutrient or nutrient can also it's going to cause weight loss, because again, it attracts 3 grams of water. Okay, which if you're an athlete, that can be beneficial, right? Like if you're in a marathon, it's like you can use it for energy, and then you can use it for hydration. Okay, so good things, and avoids processed food. That's a good thing. That's again, a lot of these diets that we're going over today. This is the big thing right here. short-term studies. A lot of them just have short-term studies that back them up. There's not a lot of research about long-term, what it does to us, how it benefits us, how it doesn't benefit. Okay, some good things in short-term studies that are showing are things about improved blood pressure. It improves our cholesterol, that bad cholesterol, and then our triglycerides. It improves them. Okay, in short term, there's a lot of studies are showing that repetitively. Again, there's not really long-term clinical studies. There's not much out there. There's very few. This is a good thing that is new. Has anyone heard of the gut microbiome, or the good bacteria is another word for microbiome? Good bacteria, has anyone heard of that? That's a big thing right now, right, in society. There's even things about immunity defenses that it has to do. It's a big one with my son who has Crohn's. He has a decreased immune response to infections and things. He's actually sick a lot. I'm sick right now as we speak. We have to emphasize a lot of those foods that have like microorganisms, like kefir, cultured yogurt, sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha, okay, just to name a few. There's supplements too. So it's been shown because of the high fruits and veggies. So if you're taking note, because of the high fruits and veggies in the diet that this diet has, it's good for the gut bacteria, that good bacteria. Okay. Exceed recommendations on a bad thing I want to know that it does exceed recommendations on fat and protein intake. So this diet, when we look at people that are on this diet, their fat and protein intake does tend to be a little higher than what a healthy diet is supposed to be. So that's kind of like some red flags to watch out for. Some drawbacks, okay, and I'm going to go through this kind of quickly to kind of cover them a lot in our discussion. Is the absence of whole grains. Okay, some grains are good. I agree with the paleo diet that there's some grains that we don't necessarily need, like those packaged granola bars and you know, all those packaged breads and white breads and things like that are highly processed. But I also think that whole grains are those ones with the whole grain seed from the wheat. Is minimally processed. You're still getting the fiber, the B vitamins, and the iron from it. Okay. Whole grain is the key word. Did you guys know? Raise your hand if you've heard of wheat. The word wheat, W-H-E-A-T. Raise your hand. Wheat. Wheat is tricky. It can be deceiving. They're getting better, but some companies take white bread and they bleach it with caramel colors to make it look brown, and they call it wheat. So it kind of like mimics whole grain bread. So if you want to get away from what's deceiving and tricky, try to look for the word whole grain and the ingredients and on the packaging to try to get away from it. And also look at the ingredient list. And if it has caramel colors in the ingredients, then it means that they use some kind of bleaching to make it look whole grain, like it's actually natural. Okay. But whole grains like oatmeal, whole grain bread, whole grain pastas are good sources naturally of fiber, protein, B vitamins, and just in general vitamins. Okay. Again, it can have some vitamin E and some iron amounts as well. The paleo diet, because you're eliminating the dairy, the legumes, and beans, which can serve sources of protein and calcium for some vegetarians, you might have a deficiency, or you have to watch out for calcium, riboflavin, and vitamin D. The good thing about our food industry is, has anyone heard of fortifying? Raise your hand. Or enriching? Someone tell me quickly what that is. What's fortification or enrichment of something? Do we make the product have more nutrients or less nutrients? More, usually in some method, right? So that's the good thing about our industry in America is we can add, like, we can fortify orange juice with vitamin D. I've seen some almond milks and soy milks have more vitamin D and calcium than regular milk. Okay, and you'll see that. So use it as a to entice to like more vitamin B12 than milk, more vitamin D than regular milk. So the good thing is we can fortify. Enrichment is more to grain. So if you're taking notes, the word enrichment is more geared towards grain. Okay. And I'm just going to make an arrow to grain. So when you hear the word enrichment, it just means that if you belong to a culture, I usually recommend, like I'm married to an Asian, he's Mian. So we eat white rice a lot. Well, they do mostly. And so we just make sure we get that enriched white rice. And actually my son likes both Mexican and Asian rice. I think that's a good thing. You can do both. But just if your culture asks for that kind of product, make sure that it's enriched with the B vitamins, so that they're put back in the pot. Okay. It increases LDL. And then again, some people have reported in studies that it can be costly to get on this diet. And you guys know grocery prices are right now. It increases, I always tell people, and students, when you see LDL, it stands for lousy, L is lousy. So that lousy cholesterol, that bad cholesterol, it's been shown to increase it because again, on the emphasis, just like the keto, on a lot of the animal, like the meats, okay? You can eat eggs too in this diet. There's questionable theory about our ancestors ate, and actually, I'm a little bit versed in archaeology. I actually like archaeology because it has to do with nutrition too, you know that. And there is evidence that during the Paleolithic era, which is about 12,000 years ago to maybe 12,000 years ago, that there is evidence of tools, archaeological tools, and also the fossils, I should say fossils for dinosaurs, or the remains of humans in the teeth are showing that they did eat grain. And you guys know that's regional, right? Like wherever you live in the world, the region, it provides different food sources, right? So it's questionable because it depends also maybe during that area where you lived, your diet could have been different of what you eat. So very quickly, next. Here's a sample. I put it all together. This is new that I did this semester. Oh, okay. So here's an example of the paleo diet. So for breakfast, like 3 large eggs, scrambled, 3 slices of bacon. You see that emphasis on animal meat, but saturated fat. Lunch, chicken breast, spinach, so some good things. I like the strawberries, the walnuts, the olive oil, very good oils. I really like the paleo diet that emphasizes good oils. So this is an example of how to put it into an actual meal. Okay, the next. And this is an example of a list that I got from a website. And I had a look at some websites not very accurate, but I chose this one because it's pretty accurate. But these are just some of the food lists from certain categories that they allow. If you want to know, if you want a better outlook on how it looks like. Okay. And then I'm going to do the next one, and then Megan's going to do the last diet.
I think what's interesting about paleo and keto both is that there's nothing inherently wrong with either one of them. It's just that you can go too far with both of them. Would you agree?
Yes.
Yeah. If you go to the extreme, that's when you're, risking some of these cons, but it's like the paleo diet on the surface seems reasonable. And it is, lean meats, fruits and vegetables, healthy oils, but it's when you go too far and you're eliminating too many foods.
And not long term, because it's questionable what it does for us in the long term. And we're starting to see that it might have an effect on our cholesterol in the body because of the animal fat. So the long term is very questionable for all these diets. Okay, so just keep your mind open and look for those for that research to come up. I'm doing this one, and then Megan's will do the plant stuff. Intermittent fasting. Raise your hand if you've heard of it. Anyone? Yes, this one's actually very popular right now, and it's actually changing and evolving. There's different types of intermittent fasting. So these are different types of intermittent fasting. There could be a timed intermittent fasting, a modified one, or an alternating method. Okay, and just very, very briefly, I'll use this word. Very nice handwriting, huh, Megan? I'm a cursive writer, so it's very hard for me to print. And my mom's like, how'd you finish grad school? I'm like, I'm finishing my PhD right now. I'm like,
oh, wow.
Yeah. And I'm like, typing? I'm gonna want to decipher my ugly handwriting. Okay, so the timed one means you eat a certain time, and then you fast a certain time. Very simple, right? And I'll give you some examples of what they mean later, but I'll give you a quick example. You can probably fast for 16 hours and maybe eat for 8 hours. Okay, that's just one example. Okay, so there's a timing one where you eat a certain amount of time and then you fast for a certain amount of time. Then the modified one is more about calories. So if you're taking notes, the modified method of fasting it's more focused on calories. And what I mean by that is they probably say, like on the days that you fast, you only eat about 500 calories. Okay, some people might say 800 calories, depending on what calories they're using. But on the fasting days, they might say, during that time that you're, during that day, maybe you're allowed to eat a little bit of calories. Okay, like 500. Some of the modified ones, some say maybe no calories. Okay, but that's more on the third method. But the second method, the modified, is more focused on calories. Like how much calories can you eat? Sometimes they provide an amount, like restricted to 500 calories. Sometimes they restrict it to a percentage. So they can say like 20% of your, only eat 20% of your regular calories for the fasting day. So like if you eat 3,000 calories normally, they say on your fasting day, only eat 20% of 3,000. Okay, so they might take a percentage and say only eat this amount of percentage on your typical day. Okay, to restrict calories. So this is more, the modified more about restriction of calories. The third one is alternating. So alternating is kind of like the example that I have there, 5 days. You can eat for 5 days and fast for 2 days. And what you do in those fasting days can change. It can mean that you eat nothing at all. Some fasting days, it's this 5-2 fasting. This is the alternating. We'll take the 5-2, so I can kind of expand on that. What that means, a lot of times this fasting, this 2-day of fasting, they're a little bit more restrictive in the alternate. Usually they don't eat any calories. They're more restrictive. They usually just eat drink coffee, calorie-free coffee, water, tea, things that are calorie-free. So on those fasting days, for the alternate days, that's pretty, they don't eat nothing. They'll just drink water and beverages that are 0 calories. Okay, that's tough. I don't know about you, I need to function out. And I've actually tried, I'm gonna be, and I don't know if Professor Moore does this, but I actually try diet sometimes. Just to see how it feels and how it works on me, and to share with students my experiences. Okay, so I know students try themselves. Sometimes like I'm a guinea pig and I actually try it. This one was really hard for me because I do have a genetic condition and it was hard. Yeah. But I noticed it got easier after a while. I actually lost a little weight. But it wasn't long term. I started feeling brain fog, irritable. My husband noticed my anger fingers. So
hence the fad diet. Yeah, hard to follow.
Hard to function. I couldn't function optimally like as a professional, as a mother, as a wife, as everything, as a student. It focuses on when to eat, not what to eat, but I'm gonna put a question mark because that's changing. So if you're taking notes, this bullet point's changing. They're starting to give you more guidance now on when you do eat during those 8 hours. So when you're allowed to eat, they're starting to say eat fruits and vegetables, eat healthy meat. All those nice great things that you hear. So they're starting to give you more guidance on when you are eating, eat healthy foods, because before they didn't, and it kind of backfired a little bit. People were just eating whatever they wanted, but now they're giving guidance. On fasting days, I already went to that. So on the alternate day, usually eat calorie-free drinks or water is permitted. And I put modifications or resurfacing. I've seen modified versions if you're an athlete, an endurance athlete. I've seen modified versions if you're a non-endurance athlete, more like a weightlifter or sprinter or a UFC. It's actually big in the UFC fighting industry. It's starting to make a big wave with intermittent fasting because a lot of times they got to make weight. You know, and so,
they were already kind of doing it.
Yes, I know they were actually. So they were already doing it, but now they're applying it more like in a scientific matter or what. Okay, so if you're a fighter in here, you've probably heard about it. Next. It may aid in weight loss. These are some good things, some benefits. It may just be a reduction in calories because the main goal of this is calorie restriction. Okay, they're starting to give more guidance on that. On like, you know, try to, when you do eat, don't eat too many calories, don't overdo it. They found out the trial and error. They find out that when they weren't giving people guidance, people were just eating whatever they wanted, how they wanted. So now they're starting to give you a little bit more guidance on that. It may reduce diabetes. It could be good on diabetes and blood pressure. They're showing some evidence that it may be good on your blood pressure and your diabetes. Okay, but then there's controversial. Then there's studies that are saying it's not good for diabetics, which I agree because I'm a diabetic, right? Because you have to learn how to sustain your glucose levels, you know, readily with the proper foods. And if you're starving yourself, you have a episode, you know?
Yeah.
And then adult learning theory is, and this is true when we're adults, we're very stubborn. And this is across the whole human race. Okay. So, there's this theory that, because we've been programmed, or we've chosen, I have to say, we've chosen to be calorie obsessed. And it's hard to change that mentality because when we're adults, it's hard to change a habit, hard to change a perspective because we're stubborn. And it's more because it's ingrained in us. It's going to take a while to change it. But there's good evidence about if you want to learn more about how the brain can manifest new neurons and new neural pathways, look up brain plasticity. And it's kind of something that I've been reading about. But you can't teach a dog a new trick, no dog new trick. So, okay. Hypoglycemia is low blood sugars, which I experienced when I was on it. Hypoglycemia, the drawbacks or the negatives is you get low blood sugar, which leads to dizziness, fatigue, nausea, headache, hunger pains, like that's what I experienced. Unhealthy eating habits, I experienced that too. I was doing well for a while, like when I ate, I was eating healthy because I know how to eat healthy. But then after like the 4th week, I was like, I'm just hungry, like I'm just gonna eat whatever I want, because I just got extremely hungry. And now that I know more of the research, it's because it does change your hormones. You know, like, have you guys heard of your circadian clock about, you know, like, have you noticed like when time changes or you change your routine, like you automatically wake up or something, because you're changing the clocking like in your brain and in your head. So, I noticed that it changed that. I started like not sleeping well and I was waking up at different weird times. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
it changed my circadian clock. I do want to let you know that if you're taking notes, a good thing that I forgot to mention, look out for this diet. I'm kind of keeping up with the research. Neurodegenerative conditions. Okay, and I'm just gonna put neuro, because there's a lot about with the neurological, the brain. Okay, I'm gonna put the brain. There's a lot going on. Raise your hand if you've heard of Alzheimer's or dementia. Okay, which is the degeneration of brain cells, right? It's having somewhat positive effect from neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's. So keep out for that. And we're studying to see what is it that it might help with neurodegenerative diseases. Okay, which is kind of big right now because there's really no cure to it. Next. Here's an example, okay? 16-8 method, which is what I said here. So fasting for 16 hours and eating for 8 hours. So you can eat between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. only, and then other hours you don't eat at all. There's a 14-10 method. Yes, there is, okay? So there's one that you fast a little less, okay? And then you eat a little bit more for 10 hours, okay? I think that's it. Megan's gonna do the last one.
Okay.
Oh, Professor Moore, sorry. Professor Moore, I just know where's Megan.
Okay. Did you guys have any questions about intermittent fasting?
Questions about paleo or intermittent fast?
Okay. So yeah, our last diet I'm gonna talk about here is the plant-based diet. Has anyone heard of plant-based diet? Yeah, I think this is the one that's becoming more popular, kind of growing in popularity. So this is where the diet is made up mostly of whole or minimally processed plant foods. So it's not vegetarian or vegan in that you can only have plant foods. The idea is that most of what you eat is plant foods. So this would include, we've kind of mentioned this before, so I'll go quickly: vegetables, fruits, beans, lentils, nuts, seeds, whole grains. Oops, I can't see my notes now. Sorry, it's okay, you just move to the other side. And then avoiding those animal products like meat, poultry, fish, dairy, and eggs. So you don't have to give them up entirely, it's just reducing them and emphasizing the plant-based proteins more. And this one is becoming more popular. It also has scientific support. So there's a lot of good evidence showing that this has a positive impact on our health. Although, as we pointed out with the previous diets, you know, it's all kind of new. So as we're finding these diets, we have to think about, in terms of humanity, how long we've been studying these. So even if we're studying it for 10 years, that sounds like a long time, but humans usually live, you know, on average anywhere from 60 to 80 years, right? So we really need a long-term time to study these things and see how it's going to affect us in the long term. But there is some positive evidence so far that a plant-based diet is is healthy for you. And this quote is by the journalist Michael Pollan. He wrote a book called The Omnivore's Dilemma. He's a journalist, but he writes about nutrition. He is an interesting, it's kind of old now, but I think the information is still the same, but it's about how, you know, we're omnivores, we can eat anything almost, and so it's really hard for us to choose what's the healthiest thing to eat. And so this is kind of based on his research. What he came up with was eat food, real food, not processed food, not too much, mostly plants. So benefits of a plant-based diet: lowering cholesterol, since our cholesterol in our body, like the LDL, like Professor Saechao mentioned, comes from saturated fats, which mostly come from animals. So it helps lower cholesterol, helps lower blood pressure, helps reduce heart disease risk. It can also reduce your risk of cancer because fruits and vegetables, plant foods in general, are very high in fiber and they're high in antioxidants. And those are two things that really help reduce your risk for cancer and other chronic diseases like you mentioned. Those two things also help reduce inflammation in the body. It's also better for the environment. So the resources we use for agriculture to raise animals for us to consume, it takes a lot more water, it takes a lot more energy. You've probably heard about cows producing methane. So the animals themselves produce greenhouse gases. So overall, having a more plant-based diet, choosing more plant-based foods can also be better for the environment. You could also potentially save money. So meats are very expensive, right? And the price of eggs, I mean, I love eggs. You're smart to get chickens because egg prices are so high, right? So if you're eating more of those fruits and vegetables, you're gonna save money, right? You can get protein from a can of beans or a bag of lentils, and it's gonna be a lot cheaper than a steak or even something, a cheaper kind of meat like a chicken breast or something. And it is easier to follow than going completely vegetarian and vegan. So this is, if it sounds too, you're like, well, I'd love to be vegetarian, but I really love burgers or I love this one thing, then this is a great sort of compromise. So you don't have to give up everything. It's just about reducing some things, increasing others. So let's see. Challenges. If you're avoiding animal products, then you might think, oh, I'll have, meat substitutes instead, like chicken nuggets that don't have chicken, right? They're made from tofu or whatever. So if you're avoiding meats, but you're replacing it with ultra high processed foods meant to mimic meats, then you're still getting processed foods. They could still be high in saturated fat and sodium and preservatives and all those things that are not really good for our health. So, this really goes for any of the diets that we've talked about today. If you eliminate food groups only to replace them with more processed foods, then you're probably not better off and you may be worse off, depending on what it is. A plant-based diet is not necessarily low in calories, so it will not necessarily help you lose weight. It's not for that. You can lose weight, but it's not for that as some of the other diets we talked about usually come from a place of aim towards weight loss. You need to know how to use a knife in the kitchen. You need to know how to cook, right? So if we're avoiding processed foods, especially meats, vegetables, especially, they usually take a lot more processing on our ends to eat them, right? A lot of vegetables you can't eat raw or you don't want to. So that means you have to be able to cut them and cook them and know how to make them taste good. And so that can be a challenge. A lot of us don't learn how to cook these days, right? We're relying on restaurants. It may be inadequate in iron, zinc, calcium, and B12. Our main sources for those nutrients are animal and dairy products, which is why you don't have to eliminate them completely. But it can be more difficult to get those from your plant-based products alone. So something to consider when you're thinking about maybe plant-based and how plant-based. So if you still include some animal and dairy products, then you're probably okay. But if you're eliminating almost all, then you might want to think about where you're going to get those from the plant-based or supplements. And another challenge is if you're increasing fiber, it could cause GI distress. So if you were to suddenly have like a high fiber diet, you might have some gas or bloating or even diarrhea, which is unpleasant, but it will go away. So normally what we recommend is if you're going to increase fiber, whether it's a fiber supplement or ideally from foods like fruits and vegetables and whole grains, that you increase it gradually so that you have a chance to get used to it. It's great for you, but if you do it suddenly, then most people have kind of a negative reaction and then they're like, I'm never trying fiber again. But don't let that happen to you. Just try to increase it gradually. So this is an example of a plant-based diet. So we have for our protein some beans, and for our grain or starch we have some corn tortillas, and then we have vegetables. So you can see it's all plant-based, no animal products. We have things like fruit, salad, nuts on the side as well. So Some tips for following a plant-based diet. You use liquid oils. These are the healthier oils, like, soy oil, canola oil, peanut oil, olive oil, of course, we know that one's one of the best. Palm or coconut oil, even though they are plants, are very high in saturated fats. So we still want to avoid those. They're still saturated fats. Also, palm oil is really bad for the environment, so we should try to avoid as much as we can. But the liquid oils, if you're using oils, like I mentioned, olive oil, canola oil in your food, those are the healthier fats to cook your food with. Using herbs and spices to flavor your food, right? Vegetables don't always taste as good as some of the other foods, but it's all about how you prepare them. So using lots of herbs and spices to season your food and make them more appealing and help mix up the flavors a little bit. Eating a wide variety. So this goes for all the diets. It's important to try to eat as many different foods as possible in order to be the healthiest you can. And so it's easy to get kind of stuck in like, this is my plant-based diet, here's the 5 foods I eat. But if you continue to eat a variety of foods, you'll get more nutrients. Try new recipes and increase fiber gradually, I already talked about. Yeah, you can.
Sorry, I was gonna ask. If you need to go, you can go, okay? But if you want to stick around, Professor Moore will finish this and then we'll stick around for questions.
Okay, yeah, I'm
I
done.
do.
So, did you guys have any questions?
I do.
Yeah, go ahead.
How did I behave?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
How did I behave today?
How did I behave today?
How did I behave?
Who is this?
Kevin, how did Kevin behave?
I think you behaved just fine. I didn't see you disrupt us. So you're good. Here. You did.
Okay. Do you have any questions about the diets or other fad diets you know about?
You did well, Ramiro. You did well.
Or online if you guys have any questions? Thank you.
Can we access these slides later? What do you think, Megan?
It's fine with me. I just don't know where we put them. but-
Yes,
I'm happy to share enough to everyone.
yes,
Oh, okay, great.
yes, we can access, yes. We can access.
Oh, okay, and they'll be posting the recording. So I think the key takeaway is just with any new diet or any recommendations for what you should eat, just remember those red flags and think about where's the information coming from, why is this being told to me, and how accurate is it? And then use common sense, you know, if it involves eliminating a lot of foods that you know to be healthy, or it narrows your food choices to just a very limited number of foods, then that's probably not very good. So just kind of use some common sense, and then also, you know, look for some good sources of information to find out to help evaluate these, like looking for registered dietitians. There's a website, eatright.org, that is the Association for Registered Dietitians, so that's always a good place to find information. Any other questions?
Eatright.org spelled as it should be? Or
Yes,
Yes.
EAT, did you put it in there? Yeah, okay, yeah.
Okay,
Teresita beat you to it.
sometimes they get creative.
Yeah.
And then Ramiro, I'll email you the slides. Okay.
Good question. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, if you have to go, you can go. We want to keep you.
If you are in here, make sure you signed in, and thanks for
Yes.
joining us online as well.
Actually.
Just sign in if you haven't signed in, okay? And if you're in my class, you know, you stick around and say hi. If you have to go, you can go, okay?
There's a feedback form.
A selfie?
Yes, here as well.
Aw,
With me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let us know. what you
The probably need to approve.
How do the people on Zoom sign in?
Oh, Ramiro, how do you want people on Zoom to sign
They're already registered. They
Oh.
already go before we let
in?
them. Yeah.
So you're registered already? You're signed in already?
Okay, great. Thanks, Professor.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you, Professor.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
You as well.
By the way, Professor, I could tell that you eat healthy.
All right.
I put the they want to look at, take a picture with the slides on the screen. they put them up.
Oh, yes.
Direct.
In the beginning of this.